part of how you see things, it affects my vision. Now on the left eye, it's right over where I see. So if I do this, yeah, Annie and Danny are blurry. I can only tell them apart by Annie's sort of hair thing going on. If you join the choir, there's an even funnier joke, I'll tell you. But anyway, but the thing is, of course there, less so on the other eye. And I was diagnosed with this all the way back in seminary down in Texas. So this is more years ago than I'm going to admit publicly. And the thing about it is your eyes change for a certain amount of time and then they stop. Most of the time. Some of the time they start to change again. And the reality is that this particular disease, if it progresses to a certain point, you go blind. And then you need to get a corneal transplant that may or may not work. Now, when I was first informed of this, the doctor was, y'all have met those doctors that have the bedside manner of a tree frog? Yes. This was one of those. He's like, well, you know, then you might go blind, and then we'll get you a corneal transplant, you'll be all right. I'm going, what? It's not a huge thing. But because it's my vision, I think about it every day. Because it's my vision, I see it every day. Every time I take a corner, and you know, you got to have a little tire check as you go around the corner, I worry that it's because my depth perception isn't quite right enough to be able to see what I'm doing. That I think about it when I have my glasses off for one reason or another, and I happen to see something out of the corner of this eye, and I don't know who or what it is. And I don't say that, like I said, to complain, but to let you know that I know what it's like when something happens in your life and you're like, I didn't do anything. I mean, nobody knows what causes this eye disease. Some people say it might be rubbing your eyes as a kid, but people have allergies and don't get it, and some people do. They think it might be genetic, but they don't really know. And so I know what it's like to be in life, and all of a sudden, here's this thing dropped on you, and you're like, I didn't do anything. This isn't my fault. It's not like I was smoking and I got lung cancer or some other health problem and I knew it was headed there. It just happened and it's not my fault. I know what it's like to worry it's going to get worse. To know that your health is at a particular place or a particular spot and then you don't know. Because the possibility is out there and it's real and it might get you. The reason I bring that up is because I want you to know that I understand that some of you are under tremendous pressure. I know that some of you are looking at a relationship in your life and you feel like you can't live without it, but you're beginning to wonder if you can live with it. I know that some of you deal with problems with your parents that have been going on since before you moved out, after your children were born, and beyond that. I know that some of y'all have health problems that you don't want to talk about. That you don't want anybody to talk about because you don't want to believe that they can be true. And somehow if you stay silent, they're not real. I know that some of you are looking at the circumstances of your life right now and saying, this is not my fault. I did not do this. I don't know how and I don't know why, but it's like it dropped out of the sky and it decided to land on me. You see, sometimes when we are in pain, when we're in suffering, when we're in sorrow, we can hear a song like Count Your Blessings. And even though it's supposed to be encouraging and it's supposed to help us to feel better, the reality is that sometimes it makes us feel worse. Because it feels like it makes light of the pain that we're walking through. We feel that it makes light of the reality of how we feel. That no matter how good some things are, some things really stink, and it doesn't make them stink less. Because good things are happening. And so I want us to look at Mary's song because, you know, this is exactly the kind of thing that Mary is talking about. Here Mary is, and just to set the scene a little bit, what's happened is she is about 1 month pregnant with Jesus. And you'll remember the angel shows up and tells her, okay, God is going to bless you and you're going to have this baby. And you know how she felt about it when she said, yes, God, let it be to me as you say. And you know how God feels about it because it's part of His plan for redeeming the world. But I think we can also all figure out how everyone around her thought about it. We know that Joseph, when he found out she was pregnant, thought he better divorce her quietly so there wouldn't be a scandal. And it took a visit from an angel in his dreams to convince him otherwise. I can only imagine what Mary's parents said. I can only imagine what her friends and her family thought. I mean, she comes up and she's pregnant. And she says, oh, Well, what you're thinking happened didn't happen, but an angel came to me, and God made me pregnant by a miracle. Anybody here going to buy that one if their child comes up? Yeah, I don't think so. You can imagine what she was facing, what she was dealing with, and the way that people were looking at her and treating her, and the pain and sorrow that she must be in, explaining and explaining and explaining to those she most loved what really happened. And then here, at 1 month pregnant, she leaves. She leaves town and she goes to live with her Aunt Elizabeth for 3 months. She goes to stay with her. Now, Elizabeth is 6 months pregnant. And as we already know from the scriptures, she is pregnant with John the Baptist, the one who will be announcing the coming of Christ. And as Mary arrives at the doorstep, this is what happens. At that time, Mary got ready and hurried to a town in the hill country of Judea, where she entered Zechariah's home and greeted Elizabeth. When Elizabeth heard Mary's greetings, the baby leaped in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit. In a loud voice she exclaimed, "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the child you will bear. But why am I so favored that the mother of my Lord should come to me? As soon as the sound of your greeting reached my ears, the baby in my womb leaped for joy. Blessed is she who has believed that what the Lord has said to her will be accomplished." What must that have been like? After the doubts, after the frustrations, after the ill treatment at the hands of her relatives and her friends and the people around her, after nobody believing what she said, she walks across the threshold and her aunt says, "Aha! You're going to bear the Messiah, just like God promised. I'm sure of it. I know it." I'm sure Mary was looking forward to another long conversation over the kitchen table. Another attempt to convince someone that God really did it and she wasn't doing what she shouldn't have been doing. And here that reassurance comes. And here is her response, Mary's response in song. Mary said, "My soul glorifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God my Savior, for he has been mindful of the humble state of his servant." God knows where you are. God knows what you're doing. He knows what you're going through. He understands how you are feeling. He knows not just the circumstances around your life, but the inner conversation of your soul. He knows, he hears. And as Mary says, it's not just that it's background noise. It's not just that it's out there somewhere and it happens to be coming across, but that he is mindful of it. He's paying attention to it. His eyes and his heart and his mind are focused on where you are. He sees it. He understands it. It is on his mind that God is thinking about you in the depths of whatever you're facing. It's not happening because he doesn't care. It's not happening because he didn't notice or he fell asleep at the wheel. And believe me, I understand, I know those times in life where you look at the circumstances and you begin to think, God, are you driving or not? That the ship of my life seems to be going in places I can't imagine you want it to be. And yet, here it is. Did you fall asleep at the wheel? And this is a reminder to us that God did not. That it's not his negligence or his misunderstanding, but that he is mindful of where we are and what's going on. And he is right there with us in it. It is on his heart. And that as we are weeping, he is weeping with us. As we are rejoicing, he is rejoicing with us. But his presence is there. So often when we are in pain or we are in suffering, one of the worst parts about it is that feeling of being alone. That feeling that no one really understands. And to some degree it's true. No matter how many times we explain our situation to our friends, no matter how many people we know who go through something similar, each one of us has our own pain and our own sorrow, and it's not quite like anybody else's. But what God says is that he really does get it. He really does understand. And that no matter how alone we might feel, we are not alone because his heart and his attention is focused upon us. She goes on and she said, "From now on, all generations will call me blessed. For the Mighty One has done great things for me. Holy is his name. His mercy extends to those who fear him, from generation to to generation. See, here Mary is, and she says, look, the nature of God is such not only that He sees us, that He knows where we are, but that He has done great things for us throughout history. That those who have followed Him, those who have put their trust in them, those who have asked Jesus to pay for their sins and been forgiven, that God's heart and mind is on them, and that He is actively working in the world for us as we follow Him. Now we understand from the cross that it's not that the better we are, the more God does for us, and the worse we do, the more He gets us. He lets us know right up front that because all of our sin and wrongdoing is taken care of by Christ dying on the cross, nothing in our life can be punishment from Him. Nothing in our life is because we messed up before God and He's getting us back. He lets us know instead that He is not in the business of condemning us, but the business of delivering us. Not in the business of destroying us, but in the business of saving us. And He does that through His intervention in the world around us. He shows mercy to us in our life. He shows mercy to us in our situation. Now the problem that we run into is the reality is we have an idea of what the right way for our pain or our sorrow to be resolved is. We have a way that we have figured things ought to go, and that is the path. That if God were only as wise as us, if God were only as smart as we are, if God only had the kind of good planning skills that we do, this is the path He would follow, and that's the way our life would be. But the reality is that God is smarter than we are. And the reality is that God's understanding of the universe is better than ours. And the reality is that there is a path for our life that He has laid out. And sometimes the answer we want doesn't come at the time we desire it. Sometimes the answer we want never comes because there's something else God has planned. The reality is that God does not just see you where you are. He's not just mindful of you, but that He has a plan to take you from where you are to blessings beyond what you can imagine. The thing is, that doesn't necessarily look like what the world wants it to look like. That doesn't necessarily look like what we want it to look like. As we move on, Mary gives some specific examples of what God does. It says He has performed mighty deeds with His arm. He has scattered those who are proud in their inmost thoughts. He has brought down rulers from their thrones, but has lifted up the humble. He has filled the hungry with good things, but He has sent the rich away empty. He has helped His servant Israel, and remembered to be merciful to Abraham and his descendants forever, even as He said to our fathers. It's one of the strange things about God. God's actually kind of prejudiced. When you look at His Word, you find Him in the corner of the humble and the hurting. You find Him in the corner of the hungry and the poor. And oftentimes when He is referred to in terms of the rulers, of the thrones, of the rich, we find Him saying that He's not real thrilled with them. We like the underdog. We like to be in a situation where when we watch a game, if we don't know much about the teams involved, we go ahead and root for the underdog. When we watch a movie, so many movies are based off the idea that somehow a person is the underdog in a sporting contest or in a contest about whether or not someone wins a particular girl's affections, or in whatever way someone is an underdog, is a loser, is someone that everyone else is discounting. And we love to watch those movies where that underdog sort of finds a trainer or finds a helper or finds a friend who lifts them up and gets them to the point where they can win against the other person, where they can come out on top. We like the underdog. We like to see the underdog win the game. The reality is that God tells us that He too roots for the people who are away from the centers of power. That He too roots for those who are in difficulty, those who are not on top of the social structure, not on top of the way things are supposed to be, not the successful of the world. But instead that He goes for those who are hungry and those who are humble, and He supports them and He blesses them and He lifts them up. When we look to God, and He sees our situation, He sees our pain and our sorrow, He sees the gap between where we are and where we know that we ought to be, we can understand that God is on our side. You see, God knows that every one of us, we are poor in that most essential of ways. We are poor in spirit. That when we look to our lives and we look to the reality of who we ought to be versus who we are, that there's a big distance between those two. We look to that reality that says, you know what, there's a whole lot that ought to change about my life and ought to change about who I am, and that I could be better at so much of what I'm supposed to be. God looks at that in our life. He sees that in our hearts. And He says that I am right there with you to fill that hunger for righteousness and that hunger for serving me and that hunger for growing to know me better. That He's ready and waiting. That when we come to Him in that need, He is ever more likely to answer. Because He loves it when that which is small and weak overcomes that which is strong. Overcomes that which seems to be impossible to defeat. Some of you are facing a situation right now in your life that looks too big to defeat, that looks too big to overcome, that looks like too much to possibly handle. Some of you, I know what it is, and some of you, I don't. Some of you, it's something we've been praying about for years, and for some of you, it's something that happened last week. But I want you to know one thing. I want you to know that God sees where you are. And where you are is on His mind and on His heart. And He cares. He wants to do something about it. And what I want you to do is, as you look to the mountain before you, as you look to the impossible situation, to lay it in the hands of God. To say, God, I don't have the power. I don't have the strength. I don't have the ability to fix this problem. But you do. And I'm going to quit relying on all the stuff that I can do. Because there's never going to be enough. And to instead rely on Him. That He will pull you through. And wait. Because He will. I'll tell you right now, it's probably not the way that you think He will. It's probably not the idea in your head or the plan that you come up with. And it's probably not going to be as fast as you or I have been praying for. But as you walk through the night, remember, He is not lost sight of you. He is on your side. He will pull you through. As we stand and sing our hymn of decision, it's an opportunity to make a decision. I'm going to turn off my microphone, so if you want to come forward and you want me to pray for you, we will pray together right here. If God has let you know that this church is where you need to plant your life, the family you need to be a part of, then please come forward and let me know your desire to join the church. We have new members class going on, starting right now, and the next time we'll meet is on December 4th during our Sunday school time. Whatever else God has laid on your heart, I want to encourage you this morning to say yes to Him, because He knows what He's doing. Let's stand and sing.